Good morning, all, and happy Friday. Welcome to this edition of Balance in Life, where I am so excited to have my co-host, Bethany Igo, presenting to us on today. I couldn't think of a better person, and when I reached out to her and she had some things for us, I was super excited to have her come on. Today, we're going to talk about resilience in youth. We know there's a lot happening, and we know that as adults, we need to stay resilient. We need to stay strong, and continuing to pivot and respond to changes and uncertainties requires a great deal of resilience on our behalf. But it also really elicits for us that need for the youth that are in our lives. And so how can we, as we're continuing to respond and prepare ourselves and even cope with changing times, to be resilient, how can we support the youth in our lives in building their own resilience? So joining us today, my co-host Bethany Igo, and I'm Crystal Tyler Mackey, welcoming you on behalf of Virginia Cooperative Extension, our Human Development Program team, and our partners in this webinar series, North Carolina Cooperative Extension. So Bethany, welcome.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you all so much. So as Crystal has said, I am normally just the co-host on these, and I am thrilled to present this morning. And this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And certainly it's going to be familiar to those of you who are repeat attendees of Balancing Life. We've tackled this subject before, and resilience is definitely one of those buzzwords that we've heard time and time again in this last year and a half. So today I want to focus specifically on how we help foster resiliency as a skill in youth. And this is part of a series that I do in partnership with Chesterfield Prevention Services in my county. So I wanted to give a shout out to them on this opening slide as well. So let's start by defining resilience in case we're not familiar. And I don't know why there you go. So resilience is something separate and greater than simply getting through a challenging time or just surviving a difficulty. The act is, moving forward versus just getting stuck in the moment. And in fact, learning from whatever we overcome, that is resilience, that experience of growth as we get through the adversity, and then maybe even use that to apply to new challenges, because there's always going to be more challenges down the road. So what is it that makes some people more resilient than others? Resiliency really helps to dictate how we're going to move through an emergency or a crisis or a pandemic. But some people are better than others. And what is that element? And it turns out it is the earliest years in our lives. It is the relationships during that time frame that are the most critical in determining how a person copes during times of adversity. And it's not just me, it is more than 50 years of research, reviewing and studying resilience. And they have come down to this common significant determinant, which is the quality of close personal relationships. And they hone in on the parents and primary caregivers, but that those relationships play huge roles in how a youth is able to adapt and turn into an adult that is also able to be flexible and adapt. It's really fascinating. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And this is just where the number of traumas a young person may have accumulated early in life directly correlate to how they cope later in life. And negative experiences like abuse or neglect, they can have really lasting, harmful effects on the person's overall well-being well into adulthood and still grappling with those issues. The good news, I like to look on the positive side of things, is that this can also be prevented. This can also be reversed because of the plasticity of a young person's brain. And that's why we're honing in on especially resiliency in youth. We as adults can use strategies to build resilience in young people, help them overcome adversities, and then strengthen their future health. So let's dive in a little bit more to that concept. And we can trace resilience to 3 inner strengths or selves. And I will fully admit that I'm borrowing from my good friend, Alan Rasmussen, on these slides. He's the prevention specialist and a regular Balancing Life guest presenter. And he introduced these concept of the inner selves that control access to a broad range of personal talents, abilities, and personal attitudes. But these are skill sets. These are skill sets we can develop over time with intention, and we can also help young people to strengthen these three selves. So first, I'm going to just kind of refamiliarize ourselves with these terms by defining them. Self-esteem, how you feel about yourself. It's that sense of worth, that sense of value for yourself. Self-confidence affects how you act under pressure, and it's the ability to trust yourself because you feel valuable and worthy. Okay, and so self-esteem and self-confidence super connected, super tied in with one another. And the converse of that being, if you don't feel valuable, that self-confidence is going to be tanked. You're not going to trust your own gut reaction or your problem-solving skills or your coping mechanisms to deal with challenges. And then finally, we have self-concept, which is very, it very much incorporates not only how you perceive yourself, and it's all those different areas of yourself, your physical, your emotional, social, and spiritual. It's also, this self-concept is a reflection of how others respond to us and kind of what they mirror back as they see of us. So it's very interwoven with those two ideas. Overall, the strength and development of these three selves directly impacts capacity for resilience. So in other words, if those inner selves are strong, they are positive, they are healthy, that person is going to be highly resilient. They're going to have a much better success rate navigating life's challenges. If those inner selves are weak, they're underdeveloped, that person is going to be really vulnerable. The slightest of emergencies, let alone a crisis, is going to leave them feeling unable to cope, and they're just far less resilient to meet those challenges. Now, these are personal life skills. They can be taught and practiced like any other skill. We sometimes call them soft skills, and I sometimes hate that term because they are just as important as some of the skills we kind of put on a pedestal here in our country. But these are really important, and they're based on key relationships beyond just the family. So it's not just about parents or those that are directly related to these youth. It's our communities. We certainly have the potential as adults to be critical players in the growth of youth. Now, childhood experiences that lead to healthy self-esteem. This is being praised, being listened to, and by listening, being heard, really letting that young person express a range of emotions, including the bad ones, including feeling sad or lonely or whatever. Being spoken to respectfully. When we model respectful speaking to the young person, then they are going to model that back and speak to others the way we would like them to. Giving them hugs and attention. Experiencing success, whether that's in school or outside activities, that is really key. And then having trustworthy friendships, trustworthy relationships. On the contrary, those childhood experiences that lead to low self-esteem, being harshly criticized. Okay, there is room for constructive criticism for sure. We are able to teach and mold and help a young person grow when we give them some feedback. But harsh criticism can be really detrimental. Being yelled at or physically abused, ignored, ridiculed, teased. Okay, that falls into that bullying category. The expectation to be perfect all the time. So certainly as adults, we want to set expectations, high ones for our kids to meet. We want to challenge them, but unrealistic expectations, ones in which they are always falling short, that can take them back to feeling like failure, setting them up for failure, leading us into that next point. So continually experiencing failure over and over again can contribute to low self-esteem in the youth. And then a lack of those trustworthy relationships. So how can we recognize in our youth some indicators, some key qualities that are we can pick up on that this youth is struggling with low self-esteem. One of those is constant negative thinking. Sometimes it's a loop, it's that inner voice that is always negative. And how can we get them to turn that around? Shyness or embarrassment in public. And this is consistent shyness and embarrassment, not that initial, a kid is hiding behind mom's leg and then warms up to the group. Okay, consistently feeling like they just can't be out and about. Kind of related, fear of public speaking. Fear of public speaking to the extent that they're immobile and they just cannot face that challenge. Feeling bad about a lack of something in their life and really obsessively thinking about that instead of the positives or, acknowledging what they have to be focused in on something they don't have. Anxiety or fear of something in the future. Addictions of all kinds, dependency of all kinds. That can come in a lot of different forms. Food, drugs and alcohol, a dependency on a certain person in their lives that's debilitating, or spending money. Social paralysis. Relationship conflicts, arguments, or significant changes in a key relationship that youth has. This one is a big one. Constant negative comparison to others, feeling like you never quite add up to what others have or what others are doing, can be really a strong indicator of low self-esteem. Lack of control over emotions. We all experience this, but this is a consistent lack of control. So never really being able to manage a deep sadness or showing a great deal of anxiety over every single moment. That is definitely an indicator. And these all add up, right? So you've got vulnerability to decision-making, the stress, loneliness, underachievement, all of these that are avoidable, really. That's the good news to me. And this result of carrying around the low self-esteem, it can have really some significant outcomes that are here on the screen, but we can help to turn that around. That's the great news. So we can start chipping away at the low self-esteem with strategies that build resilience at a very early age and help you feel better equipped to face future challenges. I'm going to introduce you to some resilience building blocks, which were developed by a pediatrician named Kenneth Ginsburg. He created a model using 7 C's as the main components of skills building. These are really the foundation of a lot of programs, including the organization that I work for, which is Virginia 4-H Youth Development. Competence is the very first C, and it's helping the kids to trust themselves. So when we notice what young people are doing right, and we give them the opportunity to develop important skills, they feel competent. We undermine that competence when we don't allow youth to recover for themselves after they fall. It's the ability to know how to handle stressful situations effectively. And we as adults can teach stress reduction, social skills, and give youth an opportunity to practice these skills with peers to enhance their competence and in a safe space that builds their skills up slowly. Confidence is the next C, helping kids to believe in themselves. Young people need confidence to be able to navigate the world, to have the courage to think outside the box sometimes, and to recover from challenges in their lives. It's a belief in their own ability, and that is rooted in that first C, which is competence. And children can only gain confidence when they're able to demonstrate their competence in a real life situation. So we can do this by identifying child's individual strengths and help show them how they can use those strengths to overcome challenges on their own. So again, it's being in a real life situation, practicing the skills, but us as adults being there to help coach, guide, and make them feel secure in the moment. The next one is connection. Connections with other people, schools, and our communities offer youth the security that allows them to stand on their own and develop creative solutions. So youth that have close ties to friends and family and community groups are much more likely to have a strong sense of security and a sense of belonging. Youth are more likely to have strong values, and they're less likely to seek out those alternative destructive behaviors. So you can have a conversation with youth about how they can strengthen their ties by being a good friend, a caring family member, or contributing to their community in some way. Character is the next one, in which we're helping kids express their values. Youth need a clear sense of right and wrong and a commitment to integrity. Youth with character enjoy a strong sense of self-worth and ties back to confidence. They're in touch with their values and are comfortable sticking with them. They can demonstrate a caring attitude towards others. It's that empathy skill, and they have a strong sense of right and wrong. So they're prepared to make choices that contribute to the world. And we can help enhance self-esteem by teaching skills that show caring for others and empowering youth to make choices that are towards their values versus away from them, and make them feel confident in those choices. Next is contribution, helping kids to find purpose, finding a meaningful mission. I love that word, meaningful mission. So when young people contribute to others' well-being and they receive gratitude for that feels good. They learn that contribution feels good, makes them feel good, makes others feel good. And in turn, it may make them a little bit more likely to ask others for help, because they're recognizing how it feels good to help others, and they can ask or turn to others for help and do so without shame, do so without feeling bad or questioning themselves. So when youth personally experience making a contribution to their community, it's a powerful lesson that the world is actually a better place because they are in it. They feel appreciated for contributing, and it increases their willingness to take action and make choices that have a positive impact, because they're getting that good feedback when they make a contribution. And this enhances their own competence, it enhances their character, it enhances that sense of connection. So they're tying back to each other and interrelating here. Coping, I put stress isn't all bad. Young people who possess a variety of healthy coping strategies are less likely to turn to dangerous quick fixes. And we can all think of some examples of those quick fixes. It makes me feel good, grab the pint of Ben and Jerry's or whatever. But if we can give youth a wide repertoire of coping skills that match their needs, I'm talking about the social skills, stress reduction skills, they're going to be a lot better prepared to overcome life's challenges. And we can model positive coping skills as adults, support our youth in problem solving. So when something gets us down, check your reaction. And we all have those moments when we break down, but if you can check that reaction, model step-by-step problem solving, and help them to see how they can respond in the future when they're in that situation for themselves. Final C, control, helping kids take charge. And this isn't just for older kids. I think sometimes we think, it's correlated directly with the age of the child and letting go and letting them have some control. But if we can allow youth to guide decision-making even at an early age, it'll help them to understand that privileges, respect are earned when they demonstrate responsibility. And they'll learn to make wise choices and give them a sense of control. You can recognize small successes that they make and build on those. When they show or demonstrate responsibility, give them some increased freedom. Okay, you did really well making this choice. I'm going to allow you, or I want to see what you'd like to do for this set of choices. It's allowing them to determine actions. And we can provide youth with a sense that they have a choice on how they wish to think and act. and they can determine results based on these choices. This also empowers them to recover more effectively if and when they're faced with adversity. That feeling of being out of control is sometimes associated with a crisis. And so empowering them to make the decisions is really going to help them to feel they're still in control. My final takeaways. Youth need adults who believe in them unwaveringly. Youth need us, and it's not just parents. Adults in a variety of roles, whether it's direct or indirect, can contribute to skills that help youth strengthen their resilience. And we know this to be true. It could be a coach who's only with your child for 1 or 2 hours of a day, but that coach has a powerful connection that might help change the course of that young person's life. Next, the young people live up or down to the expectations that we set. So we as adults set expectations for youth, and that can be really influential. So be careful with what you're setting. Be careful in what you're setting for yourselves as well as expectations. If you say one expectation for a youth, but you're following your own personal expectations, that's not going to sit well, and youth pick up on that. And finally, how adults model healthy, resilient strategies for youth is more important than anything that they say about the strategies themselves. So in other words, we don't want to just talk the talk. We want to walk the walk. We want to model healthy relationships. We want to demonstrate positive coping mechanisms. And we want to foster our own positive self-esteem, our own positive self-confidence, our own positive self-concept. And that will set a high standard for youth to aspire in their own lives. So I am going to end there, Crystal, and I think I'm doing good on time. I'm getting used to this 30-minute thing by observing. So I'll just see if we have any questions or comments that you've picked up on in the chat box.
Good. If you all want to drop any additional questions or comments in the chat box, I'm going to lift up a couple of things. Yeah, so what jumped out to me, and I think some others, is actually one of the last things that you said, which is walking the walk. And I mentioned in the chat box, I may have even said it out loud I think I did say it out loud on last week's session, that my 12-year-old had a conversation with me about the busyness of myself and my husband. And, as I try to, talk and encourage and, try to do the best I can to ensure that they're taking care of themselves, that, our children, and that they're making good decisions and, trying to attend to the C's, right? And we don't hit them all every time. I can assure you we drop the ball many, many times. But, there's intentionality to try to do that. And so for her to take the time to stop and say, you and dad are so busy all the time. And even at the times when it's time to sit down and rest, you're still doing other things. So sort of the multitasking, it's like, yeah, they're watching. They're watching.
They definitely are. And if they got high achieving mama and papa, that can feed into that burden of expectation they're putting on themselves. And you might not have communicated that you expect perfection, but they internalize that because they see high achieving success. So it can, that can go, you're modeling good stuff, but yeah, I mean, that can definitely kind of start to snowball.
For sure. And I posted earlier too, I didn't even realize that our oldest daughter is very self-driven. She very much likes to do things to excellence and pushes herself to do things to excellence, which, in a lot of ways can be a really good trait, but it can also be really concerning. Yes. And so when we realized that she really, not only was she putting that expectation on herself, but she thought that was the expectation of her. And it was pretty eye-opening a couple of years ago when she said that out loud. That, so indeed, to your point, whatever she had said, she hadn't heard that, because that's not something that we believe or even would say, but she had seen something that gave her the message that we had that expectation. So,
Yep.
So good.
Well,
So that's what I'm saying. A lot of the walk in the walk. A lot of the walk in the walk.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sometimes is a little less intimidating than thinking you have to sit down and have elaborate conversations, especially the older the youth. Teens don't want to sit down and have the conversations about it. They want to have control over making choices on their own. And you simply model how you live. It's in a positive way, or how you're coping with stress and it's in a positive way. They naturally pick up on that and they see that it's working out for you pretty well. And they let them have the freedom to try something. And if it doesn't work out, you got to also be willing to stand back and let them recover from it on their own. And it's a hard thing to do, no matter what role you play, whether it's a coach, you want to swoop in. And that's a hard thing to do, but they are resilient, and they can be resilient when we let them. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that lift up and that reminder too, because none of us want to see our children hurting. And so we do want to swoop in, but we have to be reminded that it is building a skill set that is a foundational skill set that will last them, far beyond the years in which we are, entrusted to care for them and raise them. So that's a good reminder.
Sure. And when I say don't swoop in, it doesn't mean don't have a conversation or, hey, let's talk about it, because that's showing you're there for them and you really care. And it's that problem solving skills that you can build with them, and let's make adjustments. And what do you think? And really let them take control and take charge of the changes they might make for the future, but without trying to fix it and without panicking, because you pick up on that too. Sometimes your anxieties feed onto them before they had them themselves. And then all of a sudden they're worked up because you were worked up. So it really is very interesting. The more research I'm reading about all of this, it reinforces what we do all the time. And it is hard to walk the walk sometimes, because in a moment of emergency or crisis, we tend to, just react and not reflect first. So it's really great for me to have this refresher too, because all the different hats that all of us wear in our lives, you have these relationships with youth and you are impacting them every day, no matter how small the amount of time that you're spending with them. It's really important.
Good point, because outside of my own household and some of my volunteer work, I do a great bit of volunteer work with youth. Yes. Of all ages, right? But the older the youth are, I find how quickly they respond and resonate when they are entrusted, right? They have support around them, so they're not left on their own, but they're entrusted to engage in some decision making and engage in some problem solving. And to your point, they really do respond and then build that competence and confidence to keep moving forward and I can now be in a place where they're trusted to lead a lot of things on their own. So it's really good. Absolutely. So thank you for that. Yes. One of the lift ups, especially during, these are always important, right? The 7 C's are always important and always foundational. But wow, as we continue to shift and pivot and really go through, uncertain times that can be really unnerving to us, it's even more essential for us to be thinking about the impact, what our children are seeing and how we can equip them should they, if they're going through it while we go through it. Absolutely. But whatever else might come their way, we can use it as an opportunity to build skill sets and build a foundation. So absolutely. Thank you for all of that.
Yeah, all of you that have kids in your life, just remind them they've been through this and what did they learn from last year and what can we apply during these crazy times. That's all I can say to my kiddos as I'm working with them.
Yes, same. Might not be ideally what we like, but we can do this. We have what we need to do this, and we can do this moving forward together. So thank you, Bethany. Always rich, always good. Thank you all for being here. We will send out the slides and the recording when they are available. But having said that, I just want to wish everyone a fantastic weekend. Think about the 7 C's, and I feel like the 7 C's are really good for our youth, but also a really good reminder for the things that we need for ourselves as adults too. So thanks all. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Happy Friday.
Bye.